I'd like to welcome all of you to our second round of the selected topic sessions for North Central Pets. We have been very excited and happy with the interaction that we've had in the previous sessions, and I'm sure that we'll be able to do that again today. My name is Kathy Fay. I'm part of the executive committee for the North Central Pets committee to put this together, and just want to say thank you for being here. I'd like to welcome today our guest speaker, our session leader, if you will, and that is Brian Rusch. Brian is part of the Rotary International Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian so that he can share more about himself, and then I will get his slides up here on the screen. So welcome, Brian, and take it away.
All right, well, thank you for that, Kath. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. As Kathy said, my name is Brian Rusch, and I am a member of the Rotary International DEI Task Force. I am also the charter president of the Rotary Club for Global Action here in District 5150, which is San Francisco Bay Area. And sorry, when you loaded that up, I lost stuff. A lot of people assume that because I'm sometimes a bit extra, that I was asked to be part of the DEI task force for being a member of the LGBTQ+ community. And while I'm sure that did factor into the decision-making process, that was not actually the main reason. I have run foundations for both the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Much of my professional life has been focused in two key areas: interfaith collaboration and intergenerational dialogues. And it's been through this work that I've been able to firsthand witness the benefits to DEI and organizations. Now, a lot of us in this room are in different stages of our DEI journey. So for those of us that are very new, it's probably helpful that we have some definitions. When we talk about diversity, it really means a collective mixture of people and the identities that they have, all of us coexisting in one space. Now, for many of us in Rotary, when we talk about diversity, we automatically talk about things like race, gender, age, possibly sexual orientation or disabilities. But as we talk about diversity, we need to expand these definitions to include both visible and invisible identities. Now, if I were to describe myself, I'd tell you I'm sitting here. You can't tell, but in the box, I'm tall, very tall. I'm white. I'm a cisgender male with what we're going to call silver hair today. I have a flawless tan and I have amazing eyebrows. So if you didn't know this before, you might pick up I'm a member of the LGBTQ+ community. What you probably wouldn't know is that I've been a Rotarian for almost 23 years. I currently live part of the year in Barcelona, and I live part of the year in Northern California. I'm a vegetarian. English is my first language, but I'm also conversationally fluent in Spanish and Portuguese. I'm a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. I'm the eldest of 4 brothers who was raised by a mother who never earned more than $18,000 a year. All of this and more go to make up my personal identity and what I bring to the table of diversity. Now, why do I share this with you? I share it because, it's 100% true that we can have a Rotary Club that's full of mostly white, older, straight men, and we can have diversity in that room. But if we only have one visible diversity in a group, that's homogeny. Conversely, we can have a room that's visibly diverse: men, women, multiracial, a variety of ages, and that room can still be exclusive. This is why it's important that we factor in both visible and invisible identities. Which brings us to equity. Equity means fairness for all, regardless of visible and invisible identities. Now, some people confuse the terms equity with equality, so it's very important that we distinguish between the two. Equality means everyone is treated the same. Equity means everyone is treated fairly. Let's talk about money for a moment. According to the website ZipRecruiter, the median personal income for someone living where I live in San Francisco is about $80,000 a year. In London, it's about $53,000 a year. In Delhi, India, it's just under $3,000 a year, and in Lagos, Nigeria, it's about $900 a year. Now, if you're to become a Rotarian in San Francisco, your dues to the organization are $70 a year. If you live in London or Delhi or Lagos, it's still $70 a year. No matter where you live in the world, Rotary International charges the same amount to be a member. Is this equal? Yes. Is it fair to all concerned? In my opinion, not so much. It essentially guarantees that in certain parts of the world, only the very, very wealthy can become Rotarians. And this excludes a lot of people who would otherwise make amazing Rotarians, but they just simply cannot afford it. So I started the Rotary Club for Global Action in 2020, and my club is an e-club. It's made up of members from around the world, countries all over. We currently have 26 countries that are represented. And one of the key things that we wanted to do was remove obstacles to becoming a member. And one of those obstacles was dues. We figured out a way to either partially or fully sponsor members who live in regions where the cost of dues are cost prohibitive. Last year during the pandemic, we were able to set up hand washing stations in 4 high schools in Kenya. We provided reusable menstrual kits to more than 700 teen girls in Eastern Africa. Last May alone, we delivered 4,000 kilos of food to people in lockdown in Delhi. We provided vocational assistance in terms of finances and training to entrepreneurs in Nigeria, and we helped to provide enough syringes to vaccinate the entire population of Cuba. You might ask, am I telling you all this just to brag about my club? The answer to that is yes. But I'm also telling you this because each and every one of these projects was led by a member of my club who was sponsored to be in the club. Individuals who without sponsorship would not be Rotarians today. Now, we can talk about DEI, but we can't talk about it without talking about inclusion. Inclusion means creating a space where people feel welcome and respected. I was having a conversation with my incoming membership chair a couple of weeks ago, and I have the type of personality where when I enter any situation, whether that's meeting the Pope at the Vatican or I'm joining a foam party in Ibiza, I can fit in. He pointed out that not everyone has that ability, and he's right. And what's more important is people shouldn't have to change who they are to fit in. As leaders in this organization, it is up to us to create spaces that allow for every one of us to show up as our authentic selves. As I mentioned earlier, I've been involved with Rotary for a really long time. I first joined the Rotary Club of Hollywood in the late 90s. At that time, the Rotary Club of Hollywood was probably one of the most diverse clubs I'd ever visited. When I left LA, I started going around and visiting other clubs to try and see if I could find a new home. And I just wasn't feeling I could find a club where I fit in or where I belonged. Then a friend of mine told me that they were looking to start a new LGBTQ cultured club in the Castro. I went and met those involved, and I am so honored to tell you that I got to help charter this club. When we were creating San Francisco Castro, there were people that asked, why do we need a club like this? I can tell you why. The Castro Rotary Club stands as a model to the Rotary world that our organization truly is a diverse and inclusive organization. Since chartering Castro, 5 other LGBTQ cultured clubs have been created, including Diversidade Sem Fronteiras, which is a new club in Brazil, and Minnesota Pride, which chartered just this year in District 5590. I see you, Minnesota Pride. Now, this is the power of diversity in Rotary. Most of us know that Rotary didn't even allow women as members until 1987. I know most of you are excited as I am to welcome our first female president. I've seen Jennifer Jones speak a lot, and although she rarely discusses it, being the first woman president is a really big deal, and it's a long overdue step for our organization. But it's also interesting to note that in the history of Rotary, very few of the more than 100 men who've been president have been people of color, and of all of those, only 1 has been Black. We have work to do at all levels in our organization, and it starts at the club level. The Rotary culture is evolving. Diversity has always been one of our core values, but it has been only recently that as an organization, we are prioritizing it. In September of 2020, I was invited by then President Holger Knack to join Rotary's first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. Task Force members were selected to represent a diversity of backgrounds and cultures from around the world. We were charged with shaping a comprehensive action plan with achievable, measurable, and meaningful outcomes for Rotary. Our first priority was to assess the current state of DEI in Rotary and to articulate a vision that incorporates regional differences, needs, and priorities. Now, when we talk about regional differences, what that means is what is important for people in Minnesota is different than what's important for people in Nigeria. And we have to consider that when we're looking at DEI as a whole. Now, as a task force, the first recommendation we made was suggestions on how Rotary could strengthen our commitment to DEI. Last summer, the board approved this new statement, which reads, "At Rotary, we understand that cultivating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture is essential to realizing our vision of a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change. We value diversity and celebrate the contributions of people of all backgrounds across age, ethnicity, race, color, disability, learning style, religion, faith, socioeconomic status, culture, marital status, languages spoken, sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity, as well as differences in ideas, thoughts, values, and beliefs. Recognizing that individuals from certain groups have historically experienced barriers to membership, participation, and leadership, we commit to advancing equity in all aspects of Rotary, including in our community partnerships, so that each person has the necessary access to resources, opportunities, networks, and support to thrive. We believe that all people hold visible and invisible qualities that inherently make them unique, and we strive to create an inclusive culture where each person knows that they are valued and that they belong. In line with our value of integrity, we are committed to being honest and transparent about where we are in our DEI journey and as an organization, and to continue to learn and to do better. Now, as you might imagine, we received a lot of feedback about this new statement. Most of it was positive, some of it wasn't. One of the key questions that club and district leaders who happen to be resistant to DEI are asking that, what if this focus on DEI makes us start to lose members? Now, this is a really fascinating question to me. If our clubs, if our districts make DEI a priority, are we going to lose members? Truthfully, we might. But I would flip that around and ask, how many members are we losing because we haven't been focused on DEI? How many times has someone come to one of our clubs and not remain because it was not a place that they feel welcome? Back when we started Castro, there was a guy who came, and he was a Black guy that lived in San Francisco, who joined one of our club meetings. And he never came back. And I called him when I was starting the new club, and he's now a member of my current club. And I asked him, I'm like, what was the issue? And he's like, I went in there and it was a room full of gay men, but white gay men. And it wasn't a place where I really felt welcomed or felt like I belonged. And so even though we can try to be doing stuff to try and make our clubs as diverse as possible, we have to make sure that we really are being as inclusive as we can and including as many different types of people as we can. In addition to this new DEI statement, the task force set about conducting a DEI survey of our global membership. With the help of PricewaterhouseCoopers, we surveyed the global membership and had more than 31,000 people respond. There were 8 primary themes we identified across our global membership. The first is that members are invested in making Rotary's culture more inclusive. That is, the membership wants this. The DEI experience is inconsistent across the globe. So as I mentioned before, what is going to be common for people in the North Central United States is not going to be the same situation in the same issues and challenges that arise in Brazil. Membership cost is an obstacle for members. There's a lack of common understanding and awareness of Rotary's DEI vision and the brand. Rotary's leadership profile limits the level of diversity in leadership roles. This is another really interesting one, because as we talk about Jennifer Jones, one of the questions that constantly comes up is, why did it take so long? Well, we have a very set path for how our leaders become leaders within the organization. And since we didn't allow women until 1987, we didn't actually have a pool of people to choose from for a very long time that had actually gone through the process of being a president and an AG and a DG and going through that whole process until they could actually be eligible to be president. And so really, it's only been very recently that we've actually had leaders who were eligible for that. And that is problematic. And we have to look at that and see if there's ways that we can alter that. There is no central place to report, collect, and address discrimination or harassment. Younger members do not feel that they have a pathway to progress to leadership, and there's a lack of leadership accountability structures. Also in June, the task force presented a DEI code of conduct, which the board approved. It provides a supportive framework for how we can create and maintain an environment that is collaborative, positive, and healthy for everyone. The DEI code of conduct asks all of us in this organization to use respectful language, be supportive, foster a welcoming and inclusive environment, and to celebrate diversity. Although free expression is important, what we say and how we behave matter. All Rotary leaders, from club presidents and district governors to directors and trustees, are expected to apply this DEI code of conduct uniformly by taking responsibility for how their words and actions might affect other people. If we hear something or we observe behavior that doesn't align with the DEI code of conduct, we have several options for addressing it. First of all, if the situation can be resolved through a discussion, we encourage members or participants to talk to people directly. So often when these issues come up, something that somebody said or something they might have done wasn't done on purpose. It wasn't done to intentionally harm people. It's often done because they just didn't know. So while there's going to be mistakes and missteps and uncomfortable conversations along the way, if we can have those conversations, the end result is going to be a better, stronger Rotary. If a discussion is not possible, or the situation involves someone in a leadership role or another club, we ask that you contact club and district support staff who will review the information and follow up appropriately. And finally, if anyone is in danger or their safety is in doubt, first contact law enforcement and then contact Rotary's club and district support staff immediately. Additionally, we have set up the email address DEIinquiries@rotary.org, and that goes directly to Rotary International. If an issue arises and you feel that it's not something you can deal directly with the person or in your district or club leadership, you can contact those people. Or if you just have questions about Rotary International's commitment to DEI, you can also send an email to this address. Trained staff, all the staff members that answer this have been trained in DEI issues, and they can usually help you out and address your concerns or your issues immediately. President-elect Jennifer has made a DEI essential theme to her year, and the task force is encouraged that districts, Rotary and Rotaract Clubs are incorporating it into all their Rotary experiences. But how are we to do this? Well, I'm happy to share that districts 5580, 5950, 5960, and 6000 have already started setting up DEI committees. I would encourage any of you that are interested to reach out to your district leadership or to these individuals and explore how you can all create committees in your area. One of the things that I've realized is as we're doing this, it is very much there are regional challenges. And so it's very helpful if you can connect with people in other districts nearby you to have conversations about what they're doing, how they're addressing issues, and how we can move forward in this conversation. Additionally, if you head to myrotary.org, there's some fantastic courses for getting started on DEI in the Learning Center. Personally, I have a list of additional resources where you can learn more about Rotary and DEI. The last slide of this presentation will have my contact info. Take a screenshot. You can reach out to me whenever you want. I usually get back to people very quickly. I've also shared this list of resources with Kathy and the other people involved in this planning, so they can also get them to you if you need. Now, as Rotarians, we have the four-way test, and that was established as guiding principles for our personal and professional relationships. For me personally, through my work with Archbishop Tutu, I learned to ascribe to a personal philosophy that he first taught me. It's a philosophy called Ubuntu, and it loosely translates to I am because we are. My humanity is tied up, it's inextricably bound up in yours, and we can only be human together. This philosophy enriches my personal exploration of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it continues to lead me on my Rotary journey. So whether it's through Rotary or Rotaract or Youth Exchange, or however any of us got involved in our great organization, we stay in it because we know that through service, we can take action to affect meaningful change. We live in a beautifully diverse world, and we need to work together to value that diversity of the human experience so that every one of us can achieve our own visions of peace and prosperity. As we move forward to be of service in Rotary, let's do so by remaining authentic to ourselves and being allies to those who are being authentically themselves. I want to thank all of you so much for having me today, and I know that we have tons of time, so I am happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, Brian. If people have questions, feel free. I'm going to leave his slide on here for a moment, which makes it tricky to see everyone in case you want to capture his contact info. We will be sharing the resources that Brian mentioned. He does have a sheet of a variety of resources. I'll have those on the resource page for northcentralpets.org starting pretty much immediately after these sessions this evening. But really, we'd like to take the time now. I am going to stop sharing my screen so that we can have a discussion. And really, this is time for each of you to ask questions about maybe how do you get started in your communities, or how do you get started in your club to either have the discussion or what are some of the biggest challenges you are each facing. So this is time right now that you can also ask other Rotary International DEI questions of Brian, since he is on the task force. So is there anyone that has a question to kick off our discussion? Oh, wow, we have one that just popped up in the chat. So we're going to start there. Logan is asking, well, let's just get started here. Are there resources for outreach to diverse groups when our members aren't represented in those communities and don't have initial relationships to reach out to members from diverse groups, or insights on how we get started? How do we look at our community and just get started? Brian?
I think that there's a couple things about this, right? So there's when you are discussing the visible identities. So if you're wanting to, for example, reach out to maybe you have a huge refugee community that a Syrian refugee community that lives in your neighborhood, or that. I have found that the best way to really reach out to communities that are diverse from my regular social network is to partner with organizations in those communities. How can we go out and do something? So a lot of people sometimes ask me like, oh, okay, how do we get more gay members, right? Which is kind of a weird thing to ask, but really what we all of us should be doing, no matter what the cause is. Sorry, I keep getting I keep trying to turn my thing off and somebody keeps messaging me. But how do you get more diverse members? And I think that, you know, the best way that we get people to join our clubs is to create clubs that people want to join. So if you want to partner with other people in your community, get out there as a club and partner with other organizations, and they will see the great work that Rotary is doing, and they will want to learn more. They will want to be part of it. And I think that's the first piece. I think the second piece is something that's a little bit more complex, and it's something that all of us are working on and trying to make better. But, you know, for example, how do we make our clubs more accessible to people with disabilities? So one of the things is, you know, when you do e-meetings or any kind of meetings, is there services for closed captioning on your is it accessible via Zoom? Or if you meet in a public place, is it something that people in wheelchairs are able to get to, or people that might not be able to? You know, one of the interesting things that happened to us last year, we had Jeremy Opperman, who's a Rotarian out of South Africa and also legally blind, joined the task force, and we're like, oh, hey, can you look at our resources and share with us what you think, what your opinions are? And the next day he got back and he's like, you know, I would love to, but they're not accessible to blind people. And it was something that we didn't really think about. And I think that there's those pieces as well. So it's, for me, I very much encourage us all to get out there and partner with diverse groups in our communities to see how we can like attract membership, but then also how do we make the club experience more inclusive and something that could do it. You know, my previous club, we have a lot of young professionals in there. And one of the things that we did is we opened it up to parents to make it very easy. They could bring their kids. The kids all have their badges when the parents become members, and they kind of sit in an area where they can like eat chicken nuggets and play on their iPads and do their thing. But you know, when we want to get younger members, a lot of times, a lot of those people have kids. And so how are we making it accessible for that? Meeting times are another really simple thing. It's like, if you're only meeting at 7:30 in the morning, you're going to have some challenges getting a certain group, certain demographics of people that are willing to get there, because they've got to get kids off to school, they've got to get to work. And so maybe it's something where you shift your meeting schedule to like, oh, we're going to do it, you know, my club right now, we meet 2 different times. We meet at 9 a.m. Pacific and at 6 p.m. Pacific, different days of the month. And that is really set up so that we can accommodate time zones. But maybe it is something where you offer 1 month, 1 day, 1 meeting a month, or 2 meetings a month. We're going to meet in the evening rather than the mornings.
I think those are great points. And I'm going to read a comment here first before we go back to another question. Logan had said, great points, Brian. We just had a Puerto Rican transplant to our small town in Minnesota come in to speak. And he asked to join after seeing what we do. I didn't even connect that member prospect with this discussion. So speaker opportunities is another way to bring in diverse members with varied backgrounds.
And it really is. I think that, and for your community, you know, so for example, my club is an e-club, and we do a lot to attract people from all over the world. And so we do digital events where we blast it out to the world, and we get a lot of people to come on that. But I think that, can you, when you're doing events, when you're having meetings, create, you know, bring a speaker in that's going to attract a more diverse audience, that they'll want to come and see that, and, you know, and then they'll see, oh, great, this club is really highlighting this issue in our community. And we, maybe they're not doing the work yet, but maybe if I join this club, we could actually do that work. Because the reality is too, as someone who's been in nonprofit work for a long time, Rotary is a incredible organization that is very well respected within the rest of the nonprofit world. And so a partnership with Rotary, whether it's your local club or Rotary International, is a huge, great opportunity for a lot of people. And I think that that's something also that we can really be looking at, is how do we expand the mutual benefits that come from these kind of relationships with people.
Brian, we're going to jump a little bit to the inclusion portion. You mentioned during your talk about the scholarship program. Jean has a question. She said, we're considering starting a scholarship program. What suggestions do you have for how to structure that?
Well, Jean, I think I can only speak for what we do and how we have chosen to set it up. And I think that initially it started because of COVID, and we knew that some people hadn't been working. We wanted to make sure that the dues were not a challenge for people. And then when we started looking at it on the bigger picture, where people really just lived in regions where they couldn't afford, our dues are very low relative to the rest of the Bay Area, for sure. But still, if you live in Nigeria and you make $300 a month, you can't afford $200 a year for dues. And so it's like, how can we do that? I really wanted to make sure that it was something that nobody was turned away if they wanted it. And so they basically reach out to either of them. They have the opportunity to come. If it's something they know in advance that it is an opportunity that we have, and if somebody says they need it, we grant it, no questions asked. Like it's not something we have a whole process for it. I feel like if somebody really is willing to be a Rotarian and willing to say that they need that assistance, I'm fine with that. That's all I need to know. Now, for the money to create that, originally what we did was we reached out to our district and we're like, look, this is what we're doing, and we want to make sure that we have as many Rotarians as possible. And it was the generosity of Rotarians is amazing. We all know this, right? First of all, the people we had more seasoned Rotarians who joined our club, and they automatically were like, yes, here's some money, we'll cover this. And then we had past district governors, current district governors, people who really were like, yes, how can we help? How can we help support this? And they were happy to do so. Now, as we're 2 years in, we've had to get creative with that. For me personally, in our club, I get invited to speak at a lot of things. And as much as I appreciate sometimes the little gifts that we give, what I ask when I'm invited to speak to clubs or districts is that they support a member, a couple members, whatever that is for that, because I think that there's again, it's creating the opportunity to have more Rotarians, and also I think that people love to have that happen. They feel like they're really giving to something worthwhile.
Brian, I'm going to jump in with a question here. I think, we've talked about partnering with other organizations. We've talked about, making sure that you have the environment that welcomes, disabilities or different things, and that you have an inclusion. You're making sure that you're including people. How do you start the conversation with your current club members who may not be as open to adding more diversity to your club? Many of us live in the Midwest, and I don't want to stereotype, but many of us live in smaller communities where we may not on the surface think that our communities are that diverse. How do we start to have this conversation in our own clubs about generating more diversity?
It's a really interesting thing because, my club is incredibly diverse, but I also chartered it 2 years ago, and I had the benefit of I was already on the task force while I was chartering it. And so it was like, oh, I can factor this in, I can put this in. But, I have been involved. The Hollywood Club is an old club. San Francisco #2 is the second oldest club in the US. And so there are those challenges. And I grew up in a very rural part of Colorado. We had 2 Rotary clubs in my county, both of them all white men, 55 and older. And it's changed somewhat, but not a lot. And so I think that's is a challenge for clubs that are more established. And I think that there's a couple things. The first thing is that it really, when we talk about this, it really partially is a membership issue, right? Like I have sat through countless President's Council meetings for the last 2 years, where people are like, oh, we're losing members. How do we change this? Da, da, da. And I'm like, this is how you change that. Because when you want your clubs to reflect your community, but if you're not willing to open the club experience up and make it more inclusive, then you're not going to have those people join. And I think that that's the first thing. And there are things, a lot of us, and there's a place, for very traditional clubs, and there's a place for more progressive clubs. And people are going to find the place. And I'm very much, like my club only does international service. So if someone comes to me and they're like, hey, I really want to get involved in Rotary, but I have no problem sending them to another club if they're not the club for me. And I think that we all have to be willing to do that and not so worried about, oh, we got to get this member and we got to get this person. Because I think that sometimes we get so caught up in the numbers that we don't really consider the club experience as a whole and what we're doing to really engage and include people. Now, I was in a meeting about a year ago, and there was a woman from Marin who was an incoming president. And she's like, well, you know, I'm in Marin, it's all white people, we have no diversity. And I wanted to like jump at, it was COVID times, I wanted to jump through the screen at her because I'm just like, that's just not true. You know, I mean, like, there's a huge LGBTQ community in Marin. So what are you doing to engage with that community? There's a huge Latinx population in Marin. How, you know, I mean, there's no Latino members of her club, and yet the population is huge in that area. And so I'm like, why aren't you considering these things? And how could you be more inclusive of that? I think that it also does bring back the actual club experience, you know, that some traditional clubs, many of our traditional clubs, and all of them pretty much until my current club, they, you know, say the 4-way test at the beginning of a meeting, and some do prayers, and some say the Pledge of Allegiance, and those kind of things. And I think that if you're trying to expand your membership, you have to look and say, hey, is that reflective of my community? Because if you have a huge immigrant population in your community and you want to engage more with immigrants, then maybe saying the Pledge of Allegiance at a meeting is not the best thing, because that's not for them, you know. Or if you have a huge Muslim community, and you know, because I know that in the Midwest, yes, I'm from the Midwest originally, it's very white, but there's also a lot of sections that are not very white, and there's a lot of refugee populations in the Midwest and that are Muslim or other faiths. And so if you're starting your meetings out with prayers, then maybe that's not, you're not going to be inclusive of all those people. And so I can't answer that question for you, your club personally. That's something that your club needs to take a look at and say, hey, what is best for us and what is most reflective of our community? But those are things to be considering as you're moving forward. And I think that another piece that's really important is, how are we engaging this intergenerational conversation? Because we very much are like, oh, we got to get young people involved. We got to get more Rotaractors to do this. But then when we do, are we considering them as equal partners in what we're doing? Or are they like, I was in a meeting once and somebody referred to the Rotaractors as like their kids and how much they love them because they're like their kids. And I'm like, I have a bunch of dual members in my club, and they're like my membership chair is a dual member, you know? And so it's like creating those opportunities is bringing youth and energy into the club experience. That again, it works for my club. Not all clubs are going to be the same. Maybe, you know, I use San Francisco #2 as a lot because it's in my district and it's the opposite of what my club is, because, you know, their meetings are $45 for lunch and another $25 to park, and their dues are like $800 a year. And it's like, there's a minimum give that they have to give every year, which is not at all my club. But there's a place for that. And there's a place for people that want to be in a club like that. And that's fine. But then you also have to realize that you're going to have challenges and you're not going to be as inclusive for everybody else. And so it's really talking with your membership and your board and figuring out how to best reflect your community and your club's values.
Any other questions from anyone or thoughts? Steve, I see you unmuted.
Yes, I just wanted to first congratulate and thank Brian for everything that he's done and what you will be doing in the future. And I wanted to let you know that the Zone Institute has provided some great learning opportunities for us in this subject. We also have been very deliberate and intentional in talking about the subject at our at many other locations. Of course, pets. We've talked about it during our district's president-elect training that we did before pets started. We've also been very involved in having Dr. Todd Jenkins join us at our conference, which Kathy was there. I was really pleased and very excited to see him present on a couple different occasions. I've been having several interactive conversations about how I want to lead District 6000 in the coming year with Claudia Schabel. And she has a couple members on her team since last year, and we are talking strategies of how we want to grow and make this much stronger within our demographics within our area. So one of the challenges I'm looking for, trying to do my very best job of helping Claudia be successful with all of our clubs within our district, is the resources that you've provided that I've seen and shared with Claudia. Are there other resources that you are asking your zone DEI committee chairs to take it one step farther forward, because we want to expand the good work that we've started? And you're so right. Everybody is on a totally different journey in this process. And I'm just looking at what I can do as a district governor to help our district move forward. And Claudia's got some great incentives, what she wants to do to reach out to all the clubs. So I'll be quiet and listen to your comments. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you too for including all this education, and Todd's on the task force with me. He's amazing. It's been awesome to work with him over the last 2 years now. I think that first of all, in regards to resources, so a lot of the resources that I provided are not. I did provide the links to on the Rotary website, but there are extra resources that are available. And I have found, and what I'm really encouraging districts to do, because especially because of this relationship through International Assembly, that you know your fellow classmates as district governors, connect with them, see what they're doing, see how they're addressing issues, because there's going to be some things that need to be top down, but a lot of it needs to be bottom up, and we have to be learning across the board. Because if the task force can't be just saying, you guys got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, because that's, first of all, not going to resonate well with membership. And additionally, I think it really is, it brings us to that regionalization, right? Like in the Bay Area, we have 3 districts all in basically the San Francisco Bay Area, and they weren't really talking to each other. So over this last year, I'm really like, hey, the East Bay has a great DEI task force. We're starting ours in District 5150. Why don't we connect with them and find out what they're doing, how they're doing it, what kind of resources are available to them, what have they created? Los Angeles has also now had a huge focus on it. And so I've expanded to that to reach out and connect with those people. But I really feel like it's very much, and I'm encouraging for my part on the task force, that we actually provide that information on who the task force leaders are for each district, so that we can try and build a database so that you can connect and engage more with people in other areas. Because I think that, personally, most of my issues that I have are not issues that come up with things in my district. It's challenges that I face that other e-clubs face, right? So I connect with other e-clubs and say, hey, how are you dealing with people who are hearing impaired? Which is a very big deal, right? Because it's not just people who are deaf, but a lot of our let's face it, a lot of our Rotarians aren't getting younger, and hearing loss is something that accompanies that, right? For me personally, a lot of my members are English as a second language. So, having closed captioning also helps with that, so that they can it helps with the language ability if they don't fully understand what's going on. So I think that there's a lot of resources available. I am pushing very hard that we can build a database, and I think that we'll see it, and I'll know more in the next coming weeks. Because I'm actually meeting with Valerie Wafer, who's the head of the task force, next week, and that we can look at this a little bit better. Was there another question? I'm sorry.
No, you covered everything. Thank you very much.
Well, and Steve, just to follow up, we will be posting, as I mentioned, Brian's resource list on our North Central Pets website under the resource session following this session today, as well as we will have a recording of this session as well. So you will be able to rewatch it if you would like. Any other questions for Brian?
I wanted to add, I don't know what Rotaract
go
is
for
like
it.
in your region, but I can say, for example, in Big West Rotaract, one of the resources that I provide is a DEI guide that was created by Big West Rotaract. Rotaract does DEI much better than Rotary. they just have. I think it's an age thing. It's just something that it's something that as they kind of came into this, it was already kind of ingrained in what they were doing. And so I really encourage you to engage with Rotaractors and other younger members in your district Personally, I've made a lot of effort to engage. I spoke at Big West Rotaract back in Vancouver before COVID. And I was just asking the question, I'm like, well, why aren't you Rotarians? And there was a couple of things that came up. The first one was like, why would we want to do that? And then the second was, nobody's ever asked us. And it's fascinating to me how many young people in our organization, Rotaract, people that already are on board with Rotary, right, never were asked to become Rotarians until they reach the certain point where they feel like it's time to do that. And for me, I've really changed our structure of so we only charge Rotaractors who are dual members RI dues. We don't charge them district dues. And that was something we worked out with the district to kind of like help sponsor that. But I think that's the first piece. And then the second piece is when we can get them in like that, then they see the benefits of also being a Rotarian. They can keep on doing their Rotaract and also learn from what is a great thing about Rotarians and the youth and the ideas that come from that. I've worked with, His Holiness and Archbishop Tutu. One thing that they have in common is they're super, super old, right? But they have so much wisdom and they love to impart it to the younger generations and see what younger generations can share with them so that they felt, their Archbishop, because he's passed, and the Dalai Lama now, but so that they could felt still connected to the world today. And I think that we need that intergenerational conversation to happen. And we need, as Rotarians, we need to start taking the steps to help facilitate that, and to do what we can to really like learn more from Rotaractors as we share with them the wisdom that we've achieved through the organization.
You brought up a good point there, and you mentioned the dual membership. And I did have someone direct message me and ask what that meant, because they thought maybe someone could be a member of 2 Rotary clubs, but that is not actually the case. Brian, would you like to explain the dual membership with Rotaractors?
Yeah, so dual members are members who are in Rotaract and also members who are in Rotary. You cannot be a member of 2 Rotary clubs, but you can be a member of Rotaract and Rotary. For us, the way that we have structured it is that we waive district dues for a period of 3 years or until they turn 30. And we've got, currently we have 3 dual members, so it's about 10% of, or my club's about 36, so like 8% of our membership. But it's been something that really we're striving to do more of, because I think that there is a lot of Rotaractors just don't know what the Rotary experience is. And when they do, they're not treated as equals within our organization. They're treated as sort of like, oh, we're going to throw a big event. The Rotaractors can clean up afterwards, or they can be the help. and I think that for me, I mean, the opportunities, the things that Rotaractors have done for our club has been amazing. I was talking to Kathy earlier, we're organizing a walk through Italy in September. And this question came up like, oh, well, is it awkward with Ukraine to be doing something in Italy and fundraising there? And the Rotaractor who's in my thing is connected with all the MDIOs, and she messaged Italy and she's just like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And she didn't answer in like 2 minutes, and it's just like they're hyper connected. They're really got great ideas, and they have creative ideas for how you can take your idea to a different level and do more with it, which, I consider myself to be pretty brilliant. But I also, one of the reasons I'm brilliant is because I allow other people to like tell me what we can be doing better and learn from that, right? And so we can actually have these opportunities to do it. I really encourage all of you to engage as much as you can.
I also received another direct message. How do I find out if there are Rotaract members in my community? That I would say that we need to reach out and first of all, find out if there are Rotaract clubs in your district. They would be located on your district website, I would assume, or reach out to your district governor and your administrators and find out what there are for Rotaract clubs. But also, this is another opportunity, and we're jumping across topics, but this is great, is, if you don't know if you have Rotaract in your community, you may not have one. And because in all reality, many of our Rotaract clubs in the United States anyway, have traditionally in the past been university-based. So many other countries are having positive results with Rotaract clubs because they're community-based. So they're basically, in essence, younger Rotarians, and now they can actually be part of both organizations. And so this might be an opportunity that if there is a group of young professionals or younger individuals in your community, and maybe they're not quite ready to jump on board completely with Rotary, maybe it's a way to start a Rotaract Club, a community-based Rotaract Club in your communities. So just
And
a
it,
few thoughts there. Brian, go ahead.
it is jumping across topics, but it's also that's why this conversation is important, because DEI is so much more than just one thing. And I think that that's a lot of the resistance that we have to DEI in different regions of specifically in North America is that it very much becomes like, oh, it's about race. Or if you're in Southeast Asia or Africa, oh, it's about getting more women into Rotary. It's not. It's all of these things. It's about engaging members. It's about improving the club experience. It's about creating new ways to have projects and programs. As we look at our projects and programs, are we really engaging the community to make sure that, okay, I'm gonna set up something in Kenya, but is that project only benefiting the men in the community, or is it something that's benefiting all the members of the community? And I think that that's something that we need to look at this on the global scale and look at it in our community scale and how we can best really do our best to be as inclusive as possible as we do this.
Logan had mentioned that another avenue may be graduates from your Strive program if your club or neighboring club sponsors one. Logan, I'll admit I am not aware of what Strive is. Would you mind unmuting and sharing what Strive is?
Oh man, I am very new in our Rotary Club. I don't remember what the acronym stands for exactly, but basically it's at risk. For us, it's 11th grade students, junior level students who the school counselors identify maybe need just a friendly ear who's not a parent or a teacher. So it's a mentoring program. It's once a month on Wednesdays. They get together for lunch and just talk through issues the kids are having with class or issues that they're having at home and things like that. And the focus is on rewarding them for positive behaviors and increased grades. And then there's also a banquet at the end with scholarship awards.
That's awesome.
Thank you for that, Logan. And I see Kathy put in the chat that it's students taking a renewed interest in education. So thank you, Kathy, for sharing that. And just to piggyback off of that a little bit, it could be any of your Rotary alumni, RILA alumni, Youth Exchange alumni that have come back. Many of them are excited to be involved and interested, but may not visually see themselves in a traditional Rotary club yet. A Rotaract club may be of interest. Brian?
I'm a former Rotary Youth Exchange student, and I gained so much from Rotary. But when I came back, I mean, granted, this was a long time ago, but when I came back, I was exchange student to Brazil. I couldn't imagine getting involved in like a traditional Rotary club. There was just not a place for that. But I think if now that clubs are changing and they're evolving and they're being more inclusive, and I look at this piece like how my previous club really engaged with parents and brought young people into the club. Well, those young people, when they're 5, 6, 7, then as they get older, they're going to be the first ones that are going to want to start an Interact club. And then those kids are going to be the first ones that are going to want to start a Rotaract club when they get into the university situation. And then those are going to be the ones that start these community-based clubs. So I think that by engaging with young people much more, it really is opportunities for us. And so I think that all of this is not about how do we get people to come to us. It's like, how do we identify groups that we can actually in our community that we can engage with, and how do we best engage with them? And the other thing is that it's not, we want to make sure that we're not tokenizing people, right? Like, I don't want somebody to come to me and invite me to be the gay person in their club, and then it's like, oh, can you organize the gay pride, whatever we're going to do this year? Because it's like, I don't do that stuff. I've been to San Francisco Gay Pride, I think once in the last 22 years. So I think that it's like, really, you want to engage, you want to involve the community, but you also want to make sure that your club is welcoming and everybody is joining as an engaged Rotarian in the same way that you're an engaged Rotarian, in the same way that your best friend in the club is an engaged Rotarian. You want to create that atmosphere for everybody.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions for Brian as we wrap up? We're almost to the top of the hour. Any other questions or concerns or challenges or thoughts that you'd like to throw out? Okay. If not, I'm just going to say, first of all, thank you, Brian, for sharing all of this information. I see people clapping, and I've gotten a few comments, direct messages about thank you. This was very helpful, very interesting. We appreciate it. And I think, as Brian said before, it's starting the conversations and really just starting to take a look at it. And we appreciate all of your attendance today. Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you for the last word, and you can take 30 seconds or you can take up to 6 minutes. It's up to you.
I want to thank everybody again for including me this and for thinking about it, because that's really the first step in all of this, is that, recognizing that all of us have, I mean, my club, my district, your club, your district, all of us have challenges that we have to face in this. And so the first part of it is really identifying what the issues are. And I think that, like, taking an, as RI, and what we've done as a task force is really to take an honest look and assessment of where we are as an organization. And then that's how we're able to start moving forward. And I encourage all of you within your clubs to do the same thing. Look at your club and take an honest assessment of where you're at. And there's actually an assessment tool on the Rotary.org website to do that. And then figure out ways that you can engage with more people and make that experience better for you. And again, I think that you guys, hopefully you have my information. If you have any questions, you want to reach out, I'm always available. I usually within 12 hours, I get back to people, sometimes not, depending on what time zone I'm in, but happy to hear from anybody and answer any other questions later on if they come up. Thank you.
And I'll make sure we have your contact information along with the resources posted on our resource page of our website yet this evening. So
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
And our last round of selected topic sessions will start in about 20 minutes. So thank you very much, and we'll see
you got more today.
There's one more set today, and then we're done. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yep, we'll talk soon. Bye.